What does that actually look like to take one video podcast and repurpose it into multiple pieces of content? This is what we're talking about today, so let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Crystal here today, and we are talking about the process that I go through to take one podcast and turn it into multiple pieces of content. There's actually 8 steps that we're going to cover here today on how I go from just taking something that could be an audio-only podcast episode, but I actually repurpose it into social post and a video for my YouTube channel and lots of other fun things that we need to talk about today. So let's go to the computer and I'm going to show you how I actually record the podcast, where I get the files from, what I do from there, and all the steps in between. So let's go. The first thing that we need to talk about is how I actually get my original file. Well, obviously, I have to record something that I can turn into multiple pieces of content. So I want to tell you a little bit about Squadcast. This is my interview platform that I use to record podcast interviews as well as host other people for great coaching calls that I want to have or anything that I want recorded that will eventually become a piece of content. There's a few different reasons why I use Squadcast, and you can actually grab a free trial by going to crystalproffitt.com/Squadcast. I'm a proud affiliate and partner with them. But the reason why I choose Squadcast over Zoom or any other type of platform that's out there is because, 1, the audio quality is fantastic. 2, it is actively recording and uploading on my end and on my guest end while we're recording. So if the internet goes out or the power goes off for a weird reason, you'll have at least a partial file there. Ask me how I know. This has happened before. And 3, the video quality is amazing. This is really the selling point because I've had other people reach out to me and say, hey, you should try this other platform. It has great video quality, or you should try this one. I've tried them all, ladies and gentlemen, and Squadcast continues to be the winner for me and my content. And so it's what I use to record podcast interviews specifically for what we're talking about here today. So I'm actually using the interview that I did with my friend, Angie Trueblood. Shout out, Angie. Thank you for all of your wonderful tips and strategies you always share on the podcast. But we had a fantastic interview that I knew I wanted to also spin into a YouTube video, and it actually ended up becoming 2 separate YouTube videos because it was such good information. But what I would do is after I record my initial interview with Angie, I would come into Squadcast and I would go over to the area where you download your recordings. Now, because I know that I wanted to use the audio file and the video file for our interview, I just downloaded the MP4 file, which is for video. So you come over here to the ellipses, go over to download, and I download the MP4 file. There's a reason why I do this. It's because I can use the MP4 file and upload it into Hindenburg, which is my audio software that I use. Yes, you can upload a video file into Hindenburg, so you don't have to download all the video files, which were, you can see it's 51 minutes here, and an audio file that's 51 minutes. That's a lot of file storage that's going to be taken up if you're downloading all these different files. So I just do the MP4 because I know I'm going to need to use the video and the audio. So once I download that, I go through the regular process of what I would do to turn that into a podcast episode. So those are the steps that I use for Squadcast. So I wanted to show you a quick visual representation of what we were just talking about, from being able to download an MP4 file and upload it directly into Hindenburg. This is what it would look like. This is just the raw files dropped into Hindenburg, and you could just import them directly in, or whatever software you're using for your podcast. Maybe you need to convert it into an MP3 before you can upload it, but this is what the files look like whenever they're here. Obviously, I would need to put in my introduction and my outros and everything to make this a finished product. But since we're talking about all of the different processes, I thought I would just show you if I were doing this all over again, because this episode has actually already gone live and you're going to see that here in a second. This is what it would look like. This would be the next step in the process. So number one, I record the actual audio file and the video. Two, I would use that to turn it into an actual podcast episode. Now, let's show you what it looks like whenever that podcast episode is turned into show notes. Now, as you can see here, I told you that this is already a published episode. You can go check out the link in the description to go listen to my conversation with Angie. It really was a great one. But I turn my audio file into show notes, or you could call these a blog post. So this is another way that I repurpose my content by taking that audio file, turning it into a podcast episode, and then creating a blog style show notes for the podcast. And make sure you go check out these videos right here that show you step by step how I create show notes for my podcast. But we just wanted to do a quick overview of what this process looks like in repurposing one piece of content into multiple different formats. So this is the blog version of that. Now let's dive into how to create social posts based on the content that you have at hand. So after a podcast has been recorded, it's been edited, published, and all the things, I create social posts with soundbites. Now you can watch this video right here to see exactly how I could use Canva, which is what you're looking at right here. You could use Canva to create sound bites for your podcast. This is actually one of my most popular videos because people love to know how they can get the most out of Canva. But what I've done here is I've created a simple graphic with my lovely subject, Angie. She submitted me a headshot, which a quick tip for anybody that is interviewing people on your podcast, try to get the headshot of your guest whenever you are scheduling interviews. It makes this process a lot easier instead of trying to track them down after you've recorded the interview and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm looking for my promotional materials. It just makes things a lot easier to have that before you ever have a finished product and you're ready to promote it. I've done a lot of scrambling in the past and it's no fun for anybody. But I would create a Canva graphic here, and then I'm going to go into BuzzSprout and show you how I create the sound bites for the episodes. So here we are in BuzzSprout, which is my hosting provider. You can go to crystalproffitt.com/BuzzSprout or check out the link in the descriptions for all the tools that I recommend. And I created this soundbite using the graphic that you just saw. And I love the BuzzSprout soundbites that they have because they're super simple to use. If you want to know how to create soundbites using BuzzSprout, watch this video right here. It's going to be linked below as well. But it's a very simple process to take a graphic, and you can use custom graphics. You could use the artwork that is of your podcast, however you want to do it. But once it's created, you can come over here and download that soundbite and be able to use it in your content. And I have this soundbite, it's only a minute, so I'm going to show it to you here.
So I feel like in the early days, because I started back in 2017 pitching clients, and back then it was kind of like the heyday of guesting as it related to growing your email list. It was something that we measured on behalf of our clients. We would have them use pretty links to personalize the URLs so we could see how much traffic it generated. And then some of them would even want to tie it to their email provider to see like what amount of opt-ins and signups they were getting from podcast interviews. That has definitely shifted over the years because I think as podcast listenership has increased, it's a much bigger ask to have someone go from listening to you to go get a PDF as an example.
So now what happens after you have your soundbite and it's created and it's ready to go, I will post those on social media. And I've said this before, but the reason why I love episode descriptions for your podcast is to use that description to promote your show across your social media platforms. So what I will do is I will take that awesome soundbite that we created and I will come in and grab this information that is in the description of the episode. And this is really why I love to spend time on my podcast descriptions. You can watch this video right here where I go into the difference about show notes and descriptions and why they're all really important for marketing your content, because they all play a different purpose in how you're going to use it to promote your material. But what I'll do is I'll come in, I'll grab the description, and that is what I will upload to my different social media channels. So the next step in the process of repurposing that one video podcast and turning it into multiple pieces of content is to turn it into a YouTube video. Now, this comes to be like a very mysterious thing to a lot of people. They say, well, how do you know which clips to use? And how do you know if you're sharing too much or not enough? And should I just put the whole thing up there? This is how I think about resharing content on different platforms. When it comes to podcasting, it should be audio form, and it should be the whole thing. It should be all the stories, all the juicy details, everything that someone shares with you in an interview. But when it comes to video, I think video serves a very different purpose. I don't think that you should take the entire episode and put it up on YouTube, because I know my YouTube subscribers are there to get bite-sized nuggets of wisdom and to get strategies that they can digest and implement in a day, not over deliver with tons of information that's going to overwhelm them and make things seem hard or like it's too much or that like it's too overwhelming. I can't do all those things at once. And so this is why I will take snippets of my podcast interviews and turn them into YouTube videos. Now, here's my secret. Here's lean in if you're really interested in learning about repurposing your video content for your podcast into video for YouTube. Whenever you're in the editing portion, you're editing behind the scenes. You're not looking at video, you're editing just the audio clips for your podcast. Take note. Take note of what stands out to you. Is there a really awesome story? Is there a great piece of the interview that you're like, man, my audience really needs to hear this, or they need to hone in on this, or this should be their number one takeaway? Those are the pieces of the audio that I want to turn into a video for YouTube. There's a few reasons. One, if it's a really good clip, hopefully it's going to entice them to go listen to the entire episode. But two, those things are going to be more likely to be searched for in YouTube or on Google. Therefore, that video is going to rank higher because I can use my SEO strategies, I can title it correctly, and it just looks better than just saying, here's another clip from the podcast. No one's searching for that on YouTube. No one's looking for the latest episode of the Proffitt Podcast and they want to sit down and listen to the whole thing. The two videos that I did for Angie's interview, for example, let's just go ahead and go to the computer and I'm going to show you the two that I picked out from our conversation. I used how podcast guesting has evolved because in this part of our conversation, Angie went into that. She talked about how podcast guesting has changed since she's been doing this as part of her business. We talked about some of the trends and the things that used to work back in the day that don't work anymore. That's interesting to people, and I think that people would be looking for that on YouTube. Let's look at the other part of our conversation that I thought was worth pulling out and highlighting in a YouTube video. We also talked about podcast audits and what that looks like from guesting on other people's shows, which is Angie's specialty, and hosting your own podcast and doing an audit that way, because this is what our initial conversation was meant for. We talked about before we ever got on, the call on Squadcast, we were like, hey, let's talk about auditing. And this beautiful thing came to be where Angie had one perspective, I had a different one, and we married those two ideas together in this conversation. And it was something that I thought, you know what? If people want to know about podcast audits, they need to know about both the front end, the back end, the hosting, and the guesting. And it just turned out to be a fantastic video. But you can see this video is only 7 minutes. The other video that we created was only 5 minutes. So you don't have to use 20 minutes of a 45-minute conversation in a YouTube video. I want you to think about this smartly and how You want to create your video content to where it's actionable for your audience. It's something that adds value, and hopefully it's something that people are already looking for in your content. So we are rounding the corner. We are coming to the final 2 steps that really have to do with taking one piece of content and repurposing it in multiple places. But I want to know, what questions do you have about repurposing your podcast content, your blog content, your video content? Tell me in the comments, because we are looking to do other videos just like this that help you be more strategic. And I know this is a very specific video and how I do things, but I want to know what questions you have, and we may just feature you in an upcoming video. But now I want to go to my Google Drive, because I want to show you what happens after a video is created, what we do to promote that video on social media. So what you're looking at here is my YouTube folder on my Google Drive. And this is a recent update. I was not this organized for a long time. I actually got super overwhelmed at the end of the year last year and said, man, my YouTube files are just everywhere. They're just a total mess. So I want to show you a quick behind the scenes of how I organize this to keep them all straight. So I have my actual YouTube videos. Like once they're finished, they're complete, I save them all in this file. Then I have my IGTV and Reels videos. Now, this is what we're going to talk about in a second, but it's how I condense a longer video into 60 seconds or less. And then I have my B-roll footage. This could be stock video or video that I've created myself that I want to add into other videos. I have some raw video files. These could be from my camera. It could be from my phone. It could be something that someone else sent to me, or my actual video interviews that you saw, or videos for collaborations. I work with some fantastic companies that have asked me to create videos for them. That's where I keep them. Thumbnails. I won't get into the whole thing, but I reuse a lot of thumbnails all the time to tell you like, hey, check out this video right here. And I need to know where they are. Then I have transcriptions, reports that I use, my main theme, and of course my YouTube calendar. Now I tell you all this because if you are working with audio files, video files, you got to be organized. And whenever I have videos that are 20 plus minutes long, I don't want to add those in with my 60-second clips that are roughly the same video. It's just a shorter clip of it. So this is why I created multiple files for my YouTube videos. And I'm specifically going to go and find Angie's video that I used for the promotion of one of our videos that we did together, because I think it'll be helpful for you to see them. So I'm going to go into my IGTV Reels video folder, and here is our video that we created for the Proffitt Podcast video that I shared. It's like from the podcast, but it's also a video clip that we had from one of the YouTube videos. It's how I'm teasing out this content on social media. So I share this on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and it's a way that I can get people into the conversation of listening to what we had to share. I'm not asking people to commit and listen to the full podcast episode. I'm not even asking them to go and watch a 5-minute or 7-minute video. They can literally just go and watch a 60-second clip and make that decision. Do I want to go listen to this whole episode? Do I want to go watch that video? And I leave that up to my audience. I don't make that decision for them, right? But it's that enticingness of bring them into what you're creating, get them excited about it, and hopefully they will go watch and listen. And then the last and final way that I wanted to talk about you taking one recording of your podcast and turning it into multiple pieces of content is sharing it in your weekly emails. Now, you can watch this video right here all about email marketing and what it means and what it can mean for you and your business, but I highly recommend emailing your list at least once a week. And what I've done here, I'm going to show you how at the bottom of my emails, I will include the new resources that I share every single week. And this is a system that I've done from the very beginning. It used to be my PS strategy. I would put PS, here's a podcast episode. PPS, here's a YouTube video. PPPS, check, like it was a little bit chaotic. Now I've changed things, made them a little bit different. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, I have new resources this week, and you will see that I'm talking about Angie's episode on the podcast, and I give people options. I say, listen to our chat here, or watch this clip where we specifically talked about auditing your podcast. So it's not this big, like, long email. You can see the rest of my email was about something else, but I'm also accessing people where they are. I'm meeting them where they're at and opening the door to say, hey, if you want to see more about these specific things, content auditing or guesting on podcast, go check out these resources. Here they are. The way that I look at content and offering things to my audience, I always think about serving them, giving them a buffet of options for them to choose what content is going to be right for them. Because I know not everyone listens to my podcast. Not everyone watches all of my YouTube videos, sees all my social posts, reads all of my emails. But what I like to do is lay it out there for them to pick and choose what is going to work best for them, so it will serve them in the best place possible. But that's all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this walkthrough of how I take one piece of a podcast episode or one podcast episode and turn it into multiple pieces of content. Again, if you have questions about this, put them in the comments below. I would be happy to answer them. But what other questions do you have? Let me know, because we are working on some really fun content that's going to be coming up in the next few weeks about repurposing, batching, processes, all the different things that I use in my business to create content strategically. But if this is your first time watching a video, please make sure that you hit that thumbs up and subscribe below so you don't miss our future videos all about content creation and running your online business. Make sure you check out these other videos right here that will be filled with strategies and tips for you. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.